In a world blinded by artificial lights, we search for the neon truth that burns through the fog of deception. Experience a visual masterpiece where every frame tells a story of survival and ultimate revelation. Hit that subscribe button now and let the light guide you through.
You're an embarrassment to this family, Nora. Just sit over there and try not to say anything stupid. My mother didn't even look at me when she said it. She was adjusting my brother's tie, smoothing the lapels of the navy suit she'd bought him for this exact moment, her fingers moving with the kind of care and precision she had never once directed toward me. The conference room at Hartwell and Associates smelled like leather and fresh coffee, and I was standing near the back wall next to the catering cart, holding a tray of printed agendas. Nobody had asked me to prepare. I had prepared them anyway. Old habit. My brother Derek glanced at me over my mother's shoulder and grinned. It was the grin I'd known my whole life. Wide, lazy, dripping with the particular confidence of someone who had never once been told he wasn't good enough. "Try not to spill anything," he said. I set the tray down on the side table and checked my watch. 11 minutes. The senior partner they were all waiting for, the one who would decide whether Derek's name went on the door of this firm, was arriving in 11 minutes, and they had absolutely no idea she was already standing in the room. Growing up, I understood early that our family ran on a single currency: my brother's potential. Our father, Richard, was a man who believed in bloodlines and birth order and the kind of old-world thinking that assigned worth based on who came first. Derek was the firstborn. Derek was the son. Derek was the investment. I was the younger sister. The quiet one. The one who read too much and laughed too little and asked too many questions that made the dinner table uncomfortable. When Derek wanted to go to a prep school in Connecticut, my father paid without blinking. When I got a full academic scholarship to a state school, my father told me I should be grateful I wasn't a burden. When Derek failed out of his first year of law school, my father hired a tutor and told everyone Derek had taken a strategic gap year to reassess his priorities. When I passed the bar exam on my first attempt, my mother sent me a card that said, "Congratulations," and misspelled my name on the envelope. She'd spelled it Nora with an H. She'd been spelling it without the H for 29 years. I used to lie awake wondering what was wrong with me, what I was missing, what piece of myself I'd failed to develop that would make them look at me the way they looked at him. I spent years trying to be smaller, quieter, less of whatever it was they found irritating about my existence. Then, about 4 years ago, I stopped. I stopped wondering what was wrong with me and started paying very close attention to what was wrong with them. Derek was 34 years old and he had never once held a job for longer than 18 months. He had an instinct for landing in the right room, saying the right things to the right people, and then spectacularly failing to follow through on every promise he made. He had charmed his way into 3 different law firms over 8 years. He had charmed his way out of all 3, always with some elegant excuse. The culture wasn't the right fit. The senior partners lacked vision. He had outgrown the scope of the role. What he never said, and what the severance agreements and non-disclosures buried quietly, was that he had a pattern. He overpromised on client billings. He put his name on work other associates had done. He borrowed against his bonuses before they were approved and spent money on the kind of lifestyle that required an income he had never actually earned. My father had bailed him out every single time, not because he didn't know. Richard was not a stupid man. He bailed him out because admitting that Derek was a liability would mean admitting that Richard had been wrong for 34 years. And Richard would rather lose everything than be wrong. The current situation was, even by their standards, extraordinary. Derek had managed to position himself as a candidate for junior partner at Hartwell and Associates, a boutique mergers and acquisitions firm in downtown Chicago. The partnership buy-in was $200,000. Derek had managed to convince my father this was the moment, the pivot point, the one deal that would pay back every loan, every bailout, every bridge my father had quietly built under Derek's feet. My father had agreed to liquidate a significant portion of his retirement portfolio to cover it. What neither of them knew was that Hartwell and Associates had been quietly drowning for 14 months. I knew because it was my job to know. I'd spent 6 years building a legal advisory practice that specialized in distressed acquisitions. The moment when a firm's debt structure became more valuable than the firm itself. Hartwell had come across my desk 8 weeks ago. The senior partners were aging out. The client pipeline had stalled. And 2 of their biggest institutional accounts had quietly transferred their business to competitors. They needed capital and new leadership, or they were going to fold within a year. I had structured a quiet acquisition through my holding company 3 weeks ago. I owned the controlling interest in Hartwell and Associates. The managing partner, William Graves, now reported to me. The senior partner, Derek, and my parents were waiting to impress was William Graves. William Graves, who had received a very specific set of instructions from me this morning. I stood near the catering cart and I watched my mother fuss over Derek's collar, and I felt nothing dramatic. No rage, no grief, just the quiet, precise focus of someone who has spent a very long time waiting for exactly this moment. 9 minutes. The room filled slowly. My father came in at 8 minutes, shook Derek's hand with both of his, the way he always did, as though Derek were a client and not his son. He was wearing the watch he only wore to important occasions. The Rolex that had belonged to his own father. The one he'd promised Derek when he made partner somewhere, anywhere, eventually. He didn't acknowledge me when he entered the room. I poured coffee into a cup and set it on the table near his usual chair. I had been doing small, invisible things for this family my entire life. Today was the last time. My mother sat down and pulled out her phone and began texting someone, and then she looked up and noticed me standing near the window. "Nora, for heaven's sake, you look like you work here. Can you at least sit down? You're making the room look cluttered." "I'm fine standing," I said. She looked at me for a moment, the way she always had, with that particular blend of exasperation and indifference, and then looked back at her phone. Derek caught my eye from across the room and made a small gesture with his hand. A little shooing motion, like he was waving off a fly. I smiled at him. He didn't understand the smile. He couldn't have. The door opened at exactly 9:17, and William Graves walked in. William was 61 years old, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who had spent 4 decades in rooms where enormous amounts of money changed hands. He wore a charcoal suit and carried nothing but a single leather portfolio. He looked exactly like what Derek needed him to look like, the gatekeeper, the man who held the key. He shook Derek's hand. He shook my father's hand. He acknowledged my mother. His eyes passed over me the same way everyone's always did, briefly, neutrally, moving on. "Thank you for coming in," William said, settling into the chair at the head of the table. "Let's talk about what a partnership at Hartwell actually looks like." Derek straightened in his chair. My father leaned forward. My mother put her phone away. I stayed near the window and listened. William walked through the standard overview with the fluency of someone who had done this many times. The firm's history, the client portfolio, the partnership structure. Derek nodded along, performing the attentiveness of a man who wanted to appear thoughtful and engaged. I'd watched him do it at enough family dinners to recognize the expression. Present on the surface, somewhere else entirely underneath. Then William said, "The buy-in figure we discussed is $200,000. Before we proceed to the formal agreement, compliance requires verification of liquid assets, not a summary. An actual bank record, time-stamped within the last 72 hours. Derek's nodding slowed. "Of course," he said. "Absolutely. I have everything prepared." He reached into the briefcase at his feet and produced a manila envelope, sliding it across the table with the smooth confidence of a man who had done this before. Which he had, in a sense. Just not the way William was expecting. William didn't open it. "Our compliance process moved to fully digital last quarter," William said, glancing toward me. "For documentation of this size, we require the file uploaded directly from your banking institution's portal, transmitted in real time through our secure verification system." He paused. "My associate can walk you through the process. She handles all our document processing." He meant me. My mother frowned. "Your associate?" she repeated, looking from William to me with the expression of someone who had just discovered the furniture had an opinion. "Nora handles our compliance intake," William said, with the kind of calm that comes from complete certainty. "She's been with the firm for some time." Derek stared at me. For the first time this morning, he was actually looking at me. Not through me, not past me. At me. "Just log into your banking portal and share your screen," I said pleasantly. "It takes about 2 minutes. We can display it here." I gestured to the monitor mounted on the conference room wall. The silence that followed lasted about 4 seconds. Derek recovered quickly. He always recovered quickly. He always recovered quickly. It was genuinely one of his skills. "Sure," he said. "No problem." He pulled out his laptop. He set it on the table, he opened it, and then he didn't log into his bank. I watched him navigate to a folder on his desktop. I watched him open a file. I watched him hesitate for just a moment. The hesitation of a man talking himself into something he knew was wrong. And then I watched him attach the file to an email and send it to the display system address William had provided. 2 seconds later, the monitor on the wall populated with a document. It looked like a bank statement. Chase Premier Platinum. Account ending in 77742. Current balance $224,800. My father exhaled with visible relief. Derek smiled. My mother reached over and touched my father's arm. I walked to the monitor. There's a discrepancy I need to flag, I said. I opened my own laptop and connected it to the secondary display port. 3 documents appeared side by side on the screen. Document 1, I said, the statement Derek just transmitted. Created in Adobe Acrobat. Timestamp 4 days ago. Font embedded from a PDF editing suite, not a bank-generated document. I clicked to the second document. Document 2. The actual current balance on account ending 7742, pulled from Chase's business verification API 30 minutes ago. I paused. $412. The room went completely silent. Not the polite silence of people being thoughtful, the specific, terrible silence of people watching something collapse. Document 3. I clicked again. The Illinois Wire Fraud Statute, Section 17 to 24. Transmitting a forged financial document across a communications network to obtain a financial instrument. It's a Class 2 felony. Minimum sentence, 3 to 7 years. I closed my laptop. Derek was staring at the screen. My father had gone very still. My mother's hand was still on my father's arm, but her grip had tightened, her knuckles faintly pale. That's Derek started. A forgery, I said. Yes. You manipulated it. You set this up. He was looking at William now, his voice climbing. I asked you to provide proof of liquid assets, William said simply. You chose how to respond. Derek turned back to me. Something was happening behind his eyes. The rapid, frantic calculation of a man trying to find the exit in a room that doesn't have one. You work here, he said slowly. Why do you work here? You don't even work in law. You told everyone you went into consulting. I did go into consulting, I said. Distressed asset acquisition consulting specifically. I've been doing it for 6 years. I walked to the head of the table, where William was sitting, and he stood up and moved aside, quietly, without ceremony, and I sat down. I pulled a single folder from my bag and opened it on the table. I acquired the controlling interest in Hartwell and Associates 22 days ago, I said, through a holding company called Meridian Capital Partners. I own the firm, Derek. William works for me. This meeting has been operating under my direction from the beginning. My father made a sound. It wasn't a word. It was something lower than that. What you just transmitted, I continued, is federal evidence. You sent a forged financial document over electronic communication to secure a $200,000 financial instrument. I have the transmission logs, the metadata from the file, and 3 witnesses in this room. I laid 2 sheets of paper on the table in front of my father. Option A, I said, I forward the file and transmission logs to the U.S. Attorney's Office this afternoon. The forgery is airtight. Derek will be prosecuted. Given the paper trail from the previous 2 firms, yes, I found those non-disclosures. A judge will see a pattern. He is looking at significant time. My father's face had gone the color of old ash. Option B, I said. You sign the document in front of you. It's a full release of any legal claim against me personally or against Meridian Capital, paired with a formal acknowledgement of the debt Derek owes to your retirement account. $240,000 across 11 transfers over 8 years. I've documented all of it. In exchange, I don't make a phone call this afternoon. You can't do this, my mother said. Her voice was very controlled. You're his sister. I'm aware of that, I said. You would do this to your own family. I looked at her for a moment. I thought about the birthday card with the wrong spelling of my name. I thought about being told to sit down because I was cluttering the room. I thought about standing at the back of every important moment in this family's life, holding a tray of documents nobody asked for, being waved away like something inconvenient. I'm doing this for the same reason you've done everything you've ever done, I said, to protect my interests. My father's hands were shaking. He looked at Derek. Derek didn't look back. He was staring at the table, at the folder, at the wall. Anywhere but at the man who had liquidated his retirement fund to bet on him one more time. "You told me the money was there," my father said. His voice was very quiet. Derek said nothing. "You told me you had it. You told me this was the one. You've been telling me it was the one for 15 years. My father's voice didn't rise. It just got quieter, and somehow that was worse. "And you've always known that it wasn't there. Dad, don't." The word was flat and final. My father picked up the pen. He read the document slowly. He was a careful man. Whatever else he was, he had always been careful with documents. With language, with the fine print. He read every line. It took 4 minutes. The room was silent the entire time. Then he signed. I took the folder and slid it back into my bag. I stood up and looked at Derek. "You should find a good attorney," I said, "not for criminal charges. I'm not making that call as long as you stay out of any financial role for the next 5 years, which I'll be monitoring through the release agreement, but you'll need someone to help you sort through the rest of it." "The rest of what?" he said. "The 2 other firms have been aware of this meeting. Their legal teams have been waiting on my call." I picked up my bag. I'd suggest proactive outreach rather than waiting to hear from them. I turned to William. "Thank you. You can go ahead and schedule the staff briefing for Thursday." "Of course," William said. I walked toward the door. "Nora," my father's voice. I stopped. I turned. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him look, not smaller physically. He was still the same broad-shouldered, upright man he'd always been. Smaller in the way that people get when the story they've been telling themselves for decades finally stops being true. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I think I owe you more than one." I held that for a moment. "You do," I said, "but I'm not ready for that conversation today." He nodded, like he understood. Like maybe that was fair. My mother said nothing. She was looking at Derek the way she'd always looked at me, with a kind of baffled distance, as though she couldn't quite account for how he'd gotten here, into this chair, in this room, having become this specific kind of disappointment. I thought about saying something to her. I had a line ready. I'd had it ready for years. One of those sharp, precise sentences that would land exactly right and leave exactly the right kind of mark. I looked at her and I thought about saying it. I let it go. Some things don't need to be said. Some things are already said by the silence of a daughter who walked out of a room she owns, carrying the folder with her name on it, leaving the people who underestimated her to figure out what comes next on their own. I pushed open the glass door and stepped out into the hallway. The building's lobby was all marble floors and high ceilings, and the kind of quiet that expensive square footage buys. I walked through it without hurrying. My heels were steady on the stone. My bag was on my shoulder. My phone had 6 unread messages from my assistant about Thursday's briefing and a calendar notification for a call with our Denver acquisition team at 2 o'clock. I had a lot of work to do. I pushed through the revolving door and came out onto the street. And Chicago in October hit me clean and cold, the lake wind cutting down the corridor between the buildings. And I stood there for exactly 1 moment with my face in it, eyes closed. Then I put my sunglasses on and called my assistant back. 3 weeks later, I got a call from my father. He didn't make excuses. He didn't try to explain. He just said, very simply, that he had been thinking about a lot of things and that he had been wrong about a lot of things and that he wanted to know if I would have dinner with him sometime. Not to hash anything out, not to negotiate, just dinner. I said I would think about it. That wasn't a no. I want to be honest about that. It wasn't a no. Derek retained an attorney as I'd suggested. The 2 previous firms chose not to pursue civil action in exchange for a formal acknowledgement of conduct, which his attorney managed to keep out of public record. He is currently working at his wife's family's landscaping business in Evanston. From what I understand, he is showing up on time. My mother has not called. Hartwell and Associates closed a significant new institutional client in November and promoted 2 junior associates who had been waiting 3 years for someone to notice them. On the day we made the announcement, one of them, a young woman who had been doing work that was consistently filed under a senior colleague's name, stayed after the briefing and said, very quietly, "I wasn't sure anyone was paying attention." I was, I told her. I've been paying attention for a long time. I meant the firm. I also meant something larger than the firm. She seemed to understand both. There's a specific kind of power that gets built in the years when no one is watching, when you're standing at the side of the room, holding the thing nobody asked for, waiting to be told where to sit. People think invisibility is a disadvantage. They spend enormous energy trying to be seen, to be loud, to be the one in the center of the room. What they don't understand is that the center of the room is the most exposed position. Everyone can see you, yes, but you can only see the people directly in front of you. When you're at the edges, you see everything. I saw my brother's desperation before he knew he was desperate. I saw my father's doubt before he allowed himself to feel it. I saw the exact moment William Graves glanced at me on his way in and registered, behind the professional neutrality, that something in this room was not what it appeared to be. I saw all of it. I had always seen all of it. I just waited until the right moment to let them see me back.